So as John said, I am Harriet, so here to talk through config as code for Runbooks, which has been much anticipated. To, I guess, answer John's question out to everyone, I'm based in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, so definitely have covering everyone in the world at the moment, it seems like. So I am product manager here at Octopus UI. I joined Octopus back in 2023, so a couple of years back, and I'm working with this lovely bunch and the developer experience team, hoping to make Octopus a really easy tool to use for our developers. And I'll hand over to Caitlin for a quick intro.
Hey guys, I'm Caitlin. I'm an engineer on the DevX team. I'm based in Brisbane in Australia. I've been with Octopus for coming up to a year now and mostly working on config as code runbooks. What about you, Dylan?
I'm Dylan. I'm also a software engineer. I'm also in Brisbane. I'm also on the same team. And I've been here for a couple of years now.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So, just a quick run through of what we'll be talking about today. So, just going to go through what a runbook is at a high level, why we're doing config as code for runbooks. Caitlin will go through a demo of what this is going to look like once it's in your instances. And Dylan's going to talk through anything, key things that have changed that you should be aware of. And then we'll round out with questions. So as John said, if you do have anything that you want to ask, please do comment it and we will come back to it. So let's get started. What is a runbook? So just as a quick recap, a runbook is a way to automate workflows for routine and or emergency operational tasks. So what we mean by that is the automation of routine tasks. So examples of this include patching servers or renewing SSL certificates. Runbooks allow for us to run emergency operations so it can handle urgent tasks like failing over to a disaster recovery site or restarting servers during an incident for those times when things don't go quite the way we hoped. Runbooks also help you provision infrastructure, so they support deploying cloud infrastructure templates, or they help you manage your Kubernetes clusters. They provide flexibility and control, so Runbooks can run on various environments from test all the way through to production, and they allow for self-service execution without requiring direct access to infrastructure. And lastly, they also allow for repeatability and auditability. So processes can be repeated across environments, ensuring consistency. And they also provide a full audit trail of actions performed. So the key benefits of this is obviously increased efficiency, reducing errors, and a faster way to respond to incidents. So if you do want a deeper understanding, because Runbooks in general are new to you, we did have a webinar a couple months back where we did go through the ins and outs of the key benefits, and we dive deeper into the features of Runbooks. So please do go have a look back into the webinars from previous months, and you'll definitely be able to find that one there. So why config as code is another question. So config as code was a feature that we implemented at Octopus for our deployment processes a few years back. The benefits of config as code is things like version controls. So as customer, you can leverage version control. So you can leverage Git features like branching, pull requests, and reverting changes. It allows for collaboration, so teams can review and collaborate on configuration changes using familiar Git workflows. It's consistent, so it allows storing both application source code and deployment configuration in the same repository. And it's flexible, so you can choose to either use the Octopus UI or source-controlled implementation without losing any functionality. So since the implementation of config as code for deployment processes, we've had a very clear signal from our customers that Runbooks also needed to be stored alongside their deployment processes to provide that consistency. So config as code for Runbooks has actually been one of our most requested features on our product board roadmap, with the most amount of votes, the most amount of comments. So rest assured, that roadmap that John showed earlier on is looked at, it is reviewed, and we do go through those comments with a fine-tooth comb. So if there is anything on there that you're interested in, highly recommend upvoting and making comments. So it is one of our most anticipated features since confirming that we had started the work on this. So with that being said, Config as Code for Runbooks is going to provide all the same benefits and functionality that the deployment process does. So what I'll do is I will hand over to Caitlin now to run through a demo of what this is going to look like for you. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you. All right. So if you're already using Runbooks and you use version control, then you're going to find this really easy to understand. So I'm going to just jump in and show you a project. This is my Octopus Aquarium project, which I already have Config as Code Runbooks enabled on. So if we hop across to our Runbooks tab, now we can see that we have our branch selector. So this shows us that I have my main branch checked out, and this default chip tells us that I have my main branch set up as my default branch. And I'm using Octopus's built-in roles to say that I can run Runbooks from any branch, but Dylan can only run Runbooks from this default branch. This lock icon also tells us that our main branch is protected, so it can't be changed directly in the Octopus portal. And this gives me some extra control over exactly what code I'm allowing Dylan to run on our default branch. So let's have a look inside a runbook. This is my backup tank data runbook. And inside here, you can see that it looks a lot the same as what you'll be used to from old school runbooks. So we can see we have our runs, our process, and our settings tab here. On the runs page though, we now have some new Git information. So for each of these runs of my runbook, you can see the branch or the tag and the commit from which that run was made. And if we pop across to our process, here you can see my process just contains one step. It's the sync to backup store step, and that's a script step. And in my settings tab, I've just gone with the default settings that Octopus gives you, except that I've added a description here and I've upped my retention policy to 250. So let's have a look at what this looks like in the code. So if I go across to my project repo, we can see my backup tank data runbook here. So up the top, we have some settings. You can see my description and my run retention policy. And down the bottom, this is my runbook process. So we can see my sync to backup store script step and just the actions that it contains there. And this looks a lot like what you'll be used to seeing for your deployment as config as code. The main difference that you might notice though is that we have our settings and our process all combined into the single file. So that sits in a folder alongside all the rest of the runbooks for my project, alongside my deployment process and deployment settings. This Octopus folder just contains any projects that I have in Octopus, and that's sitting alongside the rest of my project code. So this is really great because now everything is version controlled. So you can see your changes to your runbooks alongside all the rest of your changes to the rest of your code. And back on our portal, if we have a look at the runs tab again, some Octopus experts might have noticed that while we have this Git information added, we're now actually missing our snapshot information. So this is because your Git history has replaced your snapshot history. So instead of needing to deal with snapshots to rerun previous versions of your runbook, you can easily check out an old commit or check out a tag and then run your runbook from a previous state. There we go. And we're really excited about this one because now we're taking full advantage of the power of Git and we're saving you the trouble of needing to keep track of old snapshots. Okay, so while we have been looking through our project, Dylan has reported a bug in our backup tank data runbook. So as we know, Dylan is only able to run Runbooks from this main branch, and our main branch is protected, so it can't be changed in the portal. So I need to go in and draft up a fix and then somehow get that fix onto our default branch so that Dylan can run it. So the problem that Dylan has noticed is that if our aquarium tanks contain any corrupted data, then we're at risk of syncing that across to our backup store when we run this sync. So to fix that, I'm going to add an extra step to our Runbook process to scan our tanks before syncing to the backup store. Now, another cool thing about version control is that now branches provide us with a really beautiful solution for drafting our runbooks. So you can create a branch. Let's create a Octo bug fix branch from main. And then you can just make your changes on there. And you can do this as many times as you want. So you can have as many versions of your runbook as you can have branches or commits. Okay, so to add our fix, now that we're using config as code, we have two different options to add it in. So we can either add a step using the portal, just as we always have with old school runbooks, and just take advantage of all of the automation that Octopus provides. Or since it's config as code, we can also just add our new step directly into the code. So I will check out, let me refresh. So I'll check out our new Octo bug fix branch. And then I can add my step directly in the process. There we go. So here I've added a step to scan tanks for water quality. And just so you can see that a bit more clearly, that's sitting alongside my old sync to backup store. And once I commit that onto my bug fix branch, then pretty much straight away you're going to see that reflected on the process on the Octopus portal. Oh, let's give it a refresh. And it's not on there. This is my nightmare that I've done something wrong here. Hold on. Perhaps this might just be because Dylan, our other engineer, is making a lot of runs on the Runbook, and we try not to hammer your repo. So let's have another look and hope it's there. Beautiful. Okay, so now we have our scan tanks for water quality step added to our Octo bug fix branch. So I'll give that a run as a good developer. I just want to make sure that my step has good code inside. Okay, so the last thing that I need to do is get my, there we go, Dylan is running from main right now. So the last thing I need to do is get this step onto the default branch so that Dylan will be able to run it. So this is not something that's specific to Runbooks. We can do this with our deployment process as well, but it's just a really neat feature that Octopus provides. While I'm on my Octo bug fix branch, we have this create pull request button. So if I click on that one, that's going to draft up a PR with my step added to my process and just make it really, really easy for me to merge my change from my bug fix branch onto main, onto my default branch. So once I merge that in, there we go. That's going to be available on my default branch, ready for Dylan to run it. And while I've been working on that, like as we've seen, Dylan's been running from main, and that's been going on without his work being impacted at all by mine. And the next time he runs his runbook, if we check out the main branch now, that's going to have my scan tanks for water quality step added to the branch that he's running from without him even needing to know about that change. So you can see there that Octopus is really integrating beautifully with GitHub and streamlining your process for creating your runbooks. Okay, so now let's check out how to get config as code runbooks onto your projects. So once you have config as code runbooks enabled on your Octopus instance, anytime you convert a project to use version control, you're going to automatically have config as code enabled on both your deployment processes and your runbooks. So if you're converting a new project, there's actually nothing new that you're going to need to do. But if you're using config as code for the deployment projects on your project and deployment process on your project, and you want to use it for your runbooks as well, when config as code runbooks are available to you, you're going to see this banner appear on your project's runbook page. So when you're ready to migrate, you can just click through this, click on this migrate runbooks to Git, and then follow the prompts through this dialog. So this first screen will give you a list of all your runbooks. These published runbooks are the ones that are going to appear on your portal after you convert. Draft runbooks will also be converted to code, but you won't see them on the portal just yet. And Dylan's going to talk through a little bit more about that in a minute. Next, here you can choose where your runbooks will first be committed. So you can choose an existing branch, or if you're using branch protections, a new branch is probably going to be the way to go here. So let's create an Octo migrate runbooks branch for our migration. And next you can enter a commit message. I'll just leave that with the default. And okay, success! Runbooks have been migrated to your Git repository successfully. So now that that's done, your runbooks will appear on your new branch, and you can start making commits and seeing your changes version controlled in your repo. So it's that easy. So that's basically it for our demo. And now I'll pass over to Dylan to talk a little bit more about what you can expect from config as code runbooks.
Sweet as. Thanks, Caitlin. That was a great demo. We're going to jump back to the slides now because I don't have permission to do anything fancy like Caitlin does. So you just get slides. You just get slides with me. You've probably got a few questions at this point. We've already got one in the chat. If there's any other questions that you have as I'm going through this, throw them in there. But hopefully this will answer a few of them. That just depends on how good I am at my job, really. But hopefully it'll raise some more questions. I'll note that everything that we're going through here with what's changed only applies to config as code runbooks. Existing runbooks remain as is. We haven't touched those. If you're using those, that's all the same. If you want all these new features, these are config as code only. Mostly. There's one thing, I'll call that out when we get to it, but there's one thing that we've changed for everything. First up is around snapshots, which Caitlin hinted at, is that they're gone. They still exist in the backend a little bit, and you'll be able to get at them through the API. But as far as you're concerned from a user-facing point of view, they're gone. The reason was that we worked out that turns out you don't need user-facing snapshots if you're able to run all your old versions from commits or tags, and you can see everything that's changed in that way. It's like, that's what Git is for. You already know how Git works. And if you need an old version, it's in there. Like I said, these all exist in the backend, but it means that for these config as code runbooks, API calls are way simpler. There's no creating snapshot and then running that with a bunch of different calls to different runs. It's a single call to say, run this for this given branch plus whatever environments and tenants that you want to run it for. And we make the snapshot and everything for you in the backend. Next is publish snapshots. These published snapshots existed to allow you to iterate on a runbook while keeping that stable version for someone to run, like Caitlin showed there. So you want to make changes and then not interrupt anyone who's using that published version. Snapshots are gone, as we've just established. So the whole idea of a published snapshot being a stable version is gone as well. Pretty simple. What we've done is we've taken the published snapshot and replaced it with the default branch effectively. And you'll notice a bit of a trend of things being replaced by the default branch. If you want to make changes to your runbooks and keep a stable version for people like me to run and to derail your demo, that's what branches are for. You can make changes on a branch, review it in a PR, and then merge that back through the default branch. And you can test whatever you want without getting in anyone's way. The nice thing about branches is that you can have many drafts. You used to just have the one version of the process that you could change as you're going. Now it's like branches ahoy. Make as many changes, as many branches that you want. People can work at the same time on the same runbook. And as I said, no special Octopus concepts to know here. It should feel a lot more intuitive. If you're familiar with Git, you should be able to just follow your standard Git workflows that you do for code. Triggers will always run from the default branch. They used to always run the publish snapshot. Now they just run whatever's on the default branch. Next slide is going to be about producer and consumer roles. Not everyone uses these, but they relied on snapshots. We'll go over it in a little bit of detail, just so you know if you are relying on these, you know what's going to happen there. We've worked out what's happened with snapshots is that they're gone, never want to see them again. So if you're using the producer and consumer roles, we've mapped some of that behavior over to branches. If you're not familiar with these might actually be something that's useful to you that you're not aware of, which even like people on our team, as we started doing this, we're not aware of. We've got two built-in roles for Runbooks. We've got this producer and consumer. The idea is that a consumer is someone who just needs to go in and be able to run a Runbook. Is like 2 a.m., servers are down, I need a thing that's going to reboot, and I need to know that there's one version that's sanctioned that is good to go. And so the consumer role is that they can only run that one good version, and they can only run and can't edit. Producers have pretty much full permissions. They can edit Runbooks, they can run them from run the latest version that they're testing and changing and editing and all of that. So it's like producers, ideally they'd want to know that you probably only want to run the test ones on dev, but they can run it. They can run it on anything. Now, like I said, bit of a trend going on here. Consumers used to only be able to run the published version. The default branch has replaced that published snapshot. So consumers can now only run from the default branch, and specifically the latest version of the default branch as well. So you know that if you've got a consumer, they can't like go trawling back through history and find some old commit from the default branch. They can only run that latest version. The next up is package versions. You get extra points if you saw this problem coming because we didn't see it immediately. But I think we came up with a pretty good solution for it. Because there's no snapshot, you now have more flexibility around selecting packages, even for that default branch, which has replaced the published one. When you run a Runbook, it's going to prompt you for a package every time, even for that published version. Now, flexibility is a way to frame it, and some people have been like, great, I didn't want that package to be locked. Depending on how you use your Runbooks, the flexibility might be replaced with like, that's just bad. We don't want that. We liked that the package was locked on the published version. So if you don't want that flexibility, as we call it, we've added a new feature to specify the package version on the step. So you can see that in the slides there, where you can set a specific version for a package, and then it's always going to use that package when you run it. And so you can't override it. And so for triggers, it's always going to use that version when you run it. For any consumers or anyone that's running a version running from the default branch, it's always going to pick up that specific version when you run it, which kind of gives you best of both worlds. If you want to keep using a specific version, you can use that specific version. You can then create a branch, change that version, PR that back in, and kind of see the history of how that version that you're using has changed if you want as well. Where I said mostly earlier, this is where it doesn't apply. This is not config as code runbooks only. This is available for config as code existing, for runbooks in existing non-config as code projects, as well as config as code and your deployment process as well. We've put this on deployment process as well because we expect this could be pretty useful for tooling packages. If it's like you've got 10 tooling packages and one thing that you're releasing, you can just lock all those tooling packages to a version. So when you're creating releases, you don't have to tell people which specific tooling packages to use. They're locked in and they can just pick the one deployment package that they want to release. Finally, some little edge cases around migrating that you might want to know. We've changed the model. Snapshots are gone. default branches, replace things. So there's a bit of migration to think about. It's not massively different, and it should be intuitive enough. But we're going to go over it anyway because I like details, and so you get to get details. Our primary goal with this was to minimize disruption around that migration. So Caitlin showed us that next, and then it's like, okay, you've just migrated into a branch. You want to get that back onto your default branch so that at 2 a.m., someone who needs to reboot a server can continue to reboot a server. So to do that, we wanted to make sure that the thing that migrates is exactly the same set of published runbooks as they were before you converted to config as code. To do this, we only put all of those published versions of the runbooks in that runbooks folder when you migrate. So that's things that were published, runbooks that were published, doesn't include any changes that were made after they were published, and doesn't include any runbooks that were never published. So you would have seen, if you had a keen eye, in Caitlin's demo, one of those runbooks disappeared, and that was one that never had a published version. And when you do the migration, you'll kind of see it in the screen of like which ones are published, which ones are draft, and which ones are both. So the idea there is that we didn't want to risk running a migration and then suddenly some new version of a runbook that you don't want people running appears on the default branch and people are clicking that at all hours, causing more problems. And so to do that, we pretty much migrate a separate folder underneath the runbooks folder called migrated drafts. You'll get a pop-up in the portal to say you've got migrated drafts you need to do something with. The idea is you can never run from that folder. So you can have confidence. You can very quickly migrate, commit, merge, and you're good to go. And then as time goes on, you can like slowly pick out those migrated drafts and work out what you want to do with them. You might want to pick one up, create a branch, put it over there, merge those changes in because you actually want them, or you might just want to delete them. It's up to you. But we expect that over time, you'll remove everything from that folder, and then you can just remove the folder and go from there. And then you use branches for all your drafts from there. That's it. I can see we've got a few questions, but as far as I'm concerned, you're good to go with Runbooks. We're rolling this out now. You'll see it in your instance pretty soon if it's not there already. We've worked pretty hard on this, so we would like you to love it. But if you have any thoughts, have any bugs, feature requests, future changes, don't like anything, let us know however you'd want to. Product board's always great for this feature or other features, and you may get an email and get asked to try things early if you suggest things on product board. But other than that, I'm going to hand back to Harriet so I have time to review some questions. But happy runbooking, happy migrating. And we've got the why did this take so long question, which I will answer because we preempted.
So great stuff, guys. Yeah, bunch of questions. Feel free to submit your questions right now. Got the team here, obviously willing to answer. Your questions, including the challenging ones, like why did this take so long? Actually, this is an interesting story about the backstory of the complications of doing, config as code in general. That took a while for us as well. But yeah, lots of stuff worth noting. Before you get into this question, Harriet, I did want to just mention the fact that you did write a blog post detailing this as well. So you can check that out if you're all curious. This is up on our blog. This is a blog entitled with the same name as this webinar, Introducing Config as Code for Runbooks. Definitely worth checking out there. So anyways, back to the question. So Harriet, why did this take so long?
Why did this take so long? So great question. In terms of, I guess we started building config as code for Runbooks. I'm going to go with maybe mid last year. Caitlin might tell me otherwise. And obviously it's taken a while to get to the point of delivering this. As for anything, it did not all go as smoothly as we had anticipated. You can plan and expect to have everything go accordingly, and it never does. So a classic software delivery, it just didn't kind of go our way. And then not only, obviously, we're working really hard to get this, but things pop up from in your own life, and so there are things that came and went that meant that things made it a little bit trickier for us to be able to continue working on it for some time. So it's not that it was not that we didn't want to get it done and not that we didn't want to push through, but life happens and complexities happen in software, and so unfortunately we didn't quite get to the dates that we were hoping, but hey, better late than never in my opinion. So we get there in the end.
Harriet's doing a really nice way of saying that I had a baby that came early.
I didn't want to share your news.
But thank you. But there's also there was this part of it that with config as code, we've taken the stance of like, we want to provide full feature parity with the existing feature set before we release it. It's a bit of a stance we've taken from the start, is like, we don't want to release this new thing that all you can do is run one step or whatever. We are fine with feedback on that. If you would rather see half-baked features much earlier, half-baked is potentially a bit negative, but it's like, if you want to see some of these things earlier, like that's really useful feedback on product board of like, just give me anything, like give us the core feature set that you want, that you'd be happy with, and we can run with that. It does get a bit complex when you've got migration tools that people often will just click through without reading a lot of the disclaimers of like, you might lose half of the functionality. And that migration tool is something that's always been important to us, but that's useful feedback. We've continued to take the stance with all config as code things of like, we want to have full feature parity so you can click one button and keep going as you were. But if that's something you want to see different, we would love to hear that and keep telling us that, and that can help us move needles in directions with people who make decisions.
Yeah, definitely the half-baked thing is reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa shows Homer, hey, I made fish sticks. They're burnt on the outside and frozen in the middle, so they cancel out. Anyways, Carl took the time here to mention that poor Dylan was robbed. All his furniture was taken. So maybe that's another sort of thing that we can talk about.
I thought I'd clean out my room to make it look all clean, but now I just look like one of those weird TikTok influencers that has an empty house.
All right. Let's get back to some of the questions. So Leslie asked, do you know what version of on-prem this will be rolled out in? If no, when/where can I find out?
Yes, we do. This will be in the upcoming release of Octopus UI. So for server, so we've started rolling out to our cloud-based customers, and so it will be with you very shortly. I off the top of my head don't know the actual date of that.
Somewhere around 4 weeks. We don't commit to a date until like exact last minute, but plans are somewhere in the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, so basically expect us in the 2025.1 version for server.
Fantastic. There you go. Let's get to the other questions. So Izo asks, is it possible to use version control only for runbooks and not for the deployment process?
No, we're not supporting that, and we don't currently plan to support that. If you do really want that flexibility, I think the only real answer is to run 2 separate projects, one for your runbooks and one for your deployment process.
All right, fair enough. Next question. Can we add a feature so that when the Git is unreachable, still allow opening the project using some sort of cache? Currently, we cannot open the project if Git is not reachable.
That's a great question. We would love to do that. Caching is a classic hard problem of programming. So getting the time to spend on it is difficult. This is a really good one to put on product board. And for everyone else who's running this, the more data that we have as engineers that we can kind of throw around in the faces of people who are making the decisions of what we work on next. We're all involved, but it's like we've got to have the data to prove that it's going to be useful for people. That's really good data. So if you're hitting that and you've got specific use cases, please let us know. And that's great data. It's something we're always working to improve a little bit, but to do a big full offline support is an investment that we'd all love to make if we can.
Just to show folks how that works, you can go up to this little icon up the top here. It says submit idea. And if you click that, you'll see a screen that looks like this. And you can say, support caching if you wanted to. So these and other sorts of suggestions you can make through the product board. Definitely worth checking out. So great question. All right, moving on. Mark asks, can package versions be specified by Octopus variables?
Yes. This was a funny thing that I didn't realize until we built this, is that it's effectively pretty basic feature at the moment, but it's just a dumb text box there. So anything that you can take, like when creating a release, you can enter variables into versions there. It's pretty much a text replacement for that. So you can put variables in there, and it should work.
I like it. And then the last question we have on the list right now is, how is the rollback and auditability, is that a word, like at the moment for config as code?
We don't have any first class support for rollbacks in Octopus directly. Once you've converted to config as code, you'll have your history, and you start making changes to Runbooks, you'll have your history in there. So there's nothing to stop you from creating tags of old versions or doing like revert PRs or anything like that to change your Runbooks back to previous versions. We don't have any first class support for those operations in Octopus. And that's kind of another stance mostly that we've taken as a team, is we don't want to recreate your Git provider features. Is like GitHub do that really well. And so it's like, we'll always say, go to GitHub to do that, would be our answer there.
All right. As a
if
follow-up,
that answers the question. If that answers the question.
Yeah, we'll see. The follow-up also, if there are merge conflicts, how will/does Octopus handle these conflicts in YAML files?
We kind of get around this in a bit of a cheeky way in that we don't support the merging in Octopus. So it's like, we expect you'll do your merges over in GitHub through pull requests or just by merging directly. If we run into a merge conflict marker in your files, in your Runbook files, we'll just throw an error to say we can't, this is invalid syntax and we can't read that, like you would expect with any kind of code file. So it's kind of, I guess you could say we get around it in a bit of a cheeky way, in that we don't support the merging in Octopus. So we're expecting that everything that's on a branch is going to be valid.
Fantastic. Just to remind folks that we also have other webinars coming up shortly, so you can check this out over at /webinars. If you go there, you'll see the webinar we're running right now. We have our 101s. We also have our Kubernetes delivery unlocked. Another resource I just wanted to quickly cite is this. This is our Visual Studio Code extension for Octopus Deploy. Provides syntax highlighting for your OCL files. So if you're looking to do something like that, where you have a tree explorer on the left and you've got some syntax highlighting on the right, you can certainly use that if you're of the fan variety for Visual Studio Code. So lots of options available. Any things to wrap up here before we sign off for the stream? Everyone's thumbs up. Awesome stuff. All right, I don't see any more questions. So anyways, on behalf of the team here, thank you all for joining us on today's live stream /webinar featuring obviously config as code for Runbooks. A very exciting feature, long-awaited feature. Very happy to have it now. Don't forget, if you're running cloud instances, you'll see it on your instance. And if you're running server, obviously this will come out shortly. But until next time, from all of us to all of you, happy deployments, everyone. Take care.